Good morning, friends. The 16th Sunday after Trinity. We're moving through Trinity very steadily with all the really interesting intents. And today, the intent of justice. Now, this will be really interesting. Some of you might find this tough going. Some of you might find this a great relief. But I hope you all find it interesting enough to dwell on it during the week. Turn it over in your minds. Use it as a focus of meditation. Take it into your lives as a reality, which is really the intent of what of both the intent of justice and what justice in this case is intended to do, to change the way that you think about life. But let's put the story together from the beginning. From the collect, O God, in whom is no variableness. So number one, God doesn't change once the laws are established. Neither shadow of turning. So you can't sit in front of God and say, listen, I was really late for work, and ordinarily I would have done the correct thing, but I was really late, and I'll know you let me off this time. No, it doesn't work like that either. Is this sounding too tough already? Well, not really. We lean upon thy justice as upon a pillar of thy throne. Once we understand the law of God and how it acts in the world and with us, and how we can interact with it, with the law of God, then it is like leaning on the pillar of God's throne. It is absolutely dependable. We thank and bless thee for thy holy law that changeth not. I mean, isn't that a great thing? Once we understand the law deeply, once we get in alignment with it, it doesn't change. How many things in our lives change, do you think? Well, probably everything. Life on earth is all about change. Everything is changing all the time. Our experiences, our understanding of those experiences, our joys, our disappointments, successes, failures, change. And there's lots of funny expressions about that. But with the change in thy holy law not changeth, and we pray for wisdom, we pray that is for understanding, for a softening of our hearts so we can really understand it. We pray for wisdom, that under it we may live according to thy will. So there's the package. There's the package. That's what we're operating under. There's no variableness, no shadow of turning. We can depend on this justice as if we are leaning on the pillar of God's throne. And we thank God for his holy law that changeth not. And we pray for wisdom that we can understand it and work with it. So that's how it works. Now, when we look at the epistle, now we start to unpack this, as we say, in the 21st century, start to unpack that principle. St. Paul is writing to the Galatians, let every man prove his own work, for every man shall bear his own burden. That is, we come into this world not knowing much, but we come in with past experiences and past connections, and they have to play out in this life. Some people call this karma. Some people just call it life after life. Some people call it continuous experience, experienced at different levels, always experienced at different levels. And so Paul says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. What does that mean, God is not mocked? Be not deceived. It means you can't trick God. You can't sort of do a deal. You can't say, listen, God, here's the deal. if I'm really good now, why don't we forget about that other stuff? Now, God only deals with love. God only deals with assisting us playing out our destiny, which is unique to us, in alignment with God's will. So, what is this suggesting that God is not mocked? Does God dish out the punishments? Does God dish out the disappointments? No, he doesn't. We dish those out to ourselves. That's the hard bit. That's the hard bit to take on board. You say, that can't be right. I don't deserve any of this. I only deserve good things. No. The next door neighbours, they're making a lot of noise. That's a different matter altogether. They need to get what's coming to them. See, we take the part of God. We like to dish out justice whenever it suits us. Our version of justice. But how much view of life do we have? A little bit. How much do we really understand is going on in our life and the lives of everyone else we meet? Tiny, tiny bit. How much do we know about anybody? Only the way we interact with them. What are we required to do in our interactions with people? Think of them as being a part of God. How do we do that? We just imagine. We just imagine we're talking. I'm talking from my God presence to the other person's God presence. Are they being unpleasant to us? Maybe. Are they being frightful to us from our point of view? Maybe. What do we do about it? Fine. God will take care of all of that. We just deal with this unvariableness of God's law. It takes a while for this to really sink in, and it takes a while for it to start having an effect on our behaviour. That is, the way we change, the way we expect things to happen. Now, ideally, we stop from going along the lines of, well, you know, I deserve a lot because I'm just such a wonderful person. We go from that sort of position, which is pretty natural, because we are all self-centered, or we think we are self-centered, and we want to move from being self-centered to Christ-centered, and it's a little journey, maybe short journey, maybe long journey, but we want to go from self-centered to Christ-centered. We want to do that as quickly as we can, under guidance, so we don't make too many mistakes in even doing that. And we certainly don't want to become a bit of a pain to people while we're on that journey, and we might think we're just a little bit special. We have to watch that as well. This is justice, remember? This is the intent of justice and how it plays out in our world. And now we're talking about, how do we actually do it? How does it start to change and grow within us? If we look at the gospel, we now move to a different part of this story. Liberal Catholics have a very broad view of life. We don't regard just one life as when it all happens. We regard that we have many lives on earth and that consciousness persists after death. Many lives on earth, our consciousness persists in a different way when we pass through death, the way we think about death. And so we are changing, always changing. God's law doesn't change, we are changing. Now that's happened to be good news, although you mightn't think so. Because if you think about our state now, which is sort of a mixture of good and bad, isn't it good that we can change? Isn't that good news? What about if it was the other way around and we said, okay, well, that's it. No matter what you do, you're never going to change anything. Some people think like that, which is erroneous. It's not right. Some people are not coping so well with life and just having a sad time. These things happen, and these too will pass. All sadness passes, all things pass. Change is the hallmark of where we are. So I think that's good news, because it gives us an opportunity to change from a bit of a mess and a bit of a shambles to something that's not quite so messy and not so quite shambolic and more in line with what we should be doing. But in this passage from St. John, Jesus gives us a little glimpse of some of the things that he was starting to be involved in, or telling people he was about to be involved in, as he moved towards his physical crucifixion. And what he said was, "I say to you that the hour is coming, and the dead shall hear my voice." So we understand for those 3 days he was absent, he was active in what we call the after-death state. And he was drawing all these entities to him, and continues to do so. So, that may be unfamiliar for some of you, that such a thing can happen. We think it happens all the time, and we think it did happen during the crucifixion. And under what authority did he do this? He did it under the authority of the Father. All through the Gospels, Jesus continues to say, "I say what my Father tells me to say and authorizes me to say." In this passage, he says, "My Father authorizes me to speak to the people that have died and wake them up. And wake them up and bring them to the attention of themselves, that they have to get on with a new life, with a new change in consciousness, with an increased depth of spirituality." So these things are being referred to in this part of the gospel. So he finishes this by saying, "Every man will be rewarded according to his works." Now, some people get quite interested in karma, and they want to sort of find out about past lives, and they'd like to know what's going to happen next and all that sort of thing. And I was part of a discussion where we were talking to this very, very learned man, happened to be a Buddhist, and he said, well, one way of thinking about it is, if you think about your life now, what is your life now? That's the result of what's happened in the past. And most of us in the West have a very nice life, a very comfortable life. We sometimes have really difficult catastrophes, like we can't unscrew the top of the coffee jar. This is a major, major tragedy. That's about as bad as it gets. There are lots of people in other parts of the world, if we just turn on our television at any time, that are not experiencing a good part of their life. Can things change? Absolutely. Can things change for us? Absolutely, they can change for us. And then people say, what's going to happen next? What life will we have when we die? And the answer to that is, what's your predominant thought? What are your predominant thoughts in your life? What are your predominant desires? What are your predominant things that you do? Because just as the intent of today's gospel, epistle, collect, through this whole week, tells us that whatever we're doing now is going to develop in the future. So if you don't like little bits about yourself, change it. If you're doing things that are really in alignment with God's will, do more of that. And then that's what your future will be like. In alignment, and more easily in alignment with God's will. And that is the easier path. So the 16th Sunday after Trinity has got some interesting messages and interesting things to think about. But all of it comes from God. And the law is unchanging, and the law is called justice. I urge you to think on these things during the week.